Welcome to the Indie Beacon Show, where readers can discover great new books by indie authors. Your host for today's show is B Alan Bourgeois. We hope you do enjoy today's show.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Indie Beacon Show. I am your host, Alan Bourgeois, and today I have Amy Shankland with us, who's going to be talking about her latest book, and it is quite an interesting concept and story to tell. So with that, welcome, Amy. How are you?
I'm terrific, Alan.
Well, you've got an interesting book, but before we get into it, tell us a little bit about your writing career, what it's like, and how you got into writing.
Okay. Well, Alan, I knew I wanted to be an author like ever since I was 8 years old. I got a Kmart snappy blue typewriter that typed in all caps from my parents, and I would write these little books. I'd write these little stories through my teens, but I didn't really get serious about it until 2013. I went with a company called Fast Pencil to publish a fiction book called Hoop Mama. And that did fairly well for a first self-published novel. And then I went with a smaller publisher for two other nonfiction books in 2018 and then 2020. And then now here I am with Warren Publishing today.
All right. So in 2020, with that last book that came out then, was that kind of the launching pad for this book, or did it kind of merge you into this book? Tell me a little bit.
Well, that's funny. I launched a book right before the pandemic. Wasn't that wonderful timing? So it did not do too well. And so in the summer of 2020, I was talking with a client of mine. I am a grant consultant during the day. And we were talking about the events that were happening that summer. And, you know, the horrible things, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery. And my client is with Fonseca Theater Company, which is in Indianapolis, but is nationally known. The New York Times did an article about it. And Brian Fonseca, the founder, is Mexican Irish. And we had quite a conversation. And I said, you know, Brian, I thought we were better than this as a society. But I don't know, I guess I'm just a dumb white girl. And he coached me and told me about some resources. And the idea just was planted in my head because of all that was going on that summer. Like, wow, what if I interviewed people and learned some things?
And which is what your book is about. You've actually did interview some people. So tell me, what was the most interesting aspect of interviewing people?
Oh my gosh, the most interesting thing was, well, to hear how open they all are. You know, I expected number one, to not get a response. Most people said, yes, I'd love to come on board. And then number two, most every person, when I would ask them, what would you like people to do differently? They just said, just come talk to me. Ask me questions. Most every one of them was open to that. And that surprised me. I didn't think people would be so willing to have others talk to them beyond me, just interviewing them for this book. But they all just said, no, I want to talk to people. I want to share this. So that's one thing they all had in common.
So that's interesting because in your cover, you're showing a wide variety of people, male, female, different ethnic backgrounds, different sexual orientation from which I've read. All of these people were saying, just come talk to me. I mean, you didn't have some that were hesitant in some way?
That's a really good question. I did interview one person, a trans man, did the interview, I edited everything, and then I sent it back to him, and he decided, I don't want to be in this book. But I have to give him credit. He's the one that said to me, because it was going to be interviews by a dumb white girl. He's the one that said, that's a terrible title. And I said, really? He said, it is. Number one, you're not dumb. Dumb is somebody who can't speak. That's not very nice to say in your title. And he said, number two, you're 50 years old, for God's sakes. You're not a girl. So he backed out. So you're right. Not everybody was open. But he was thankfully the one that was responsible for the much better title to the book.
I have to agree with him. That is a much better title, Clueless White Woman. Out of curiosity, and I don't want to spoil the book, but when you were done with all of this, do you still feel somewhat clueless, or have you got a much better understanding?
I feel like I've come a long way, Alan. I mean, every interview changed me. I could just feel it as the weeks went on. I would lose sleep. There would be some tears. Even though I finished, I still think there is so much to learn. For example, I didn't interview any Native Americans in this book. I don't know why it didn't even occur to me, but that would have made the book even better. There's still a lot for me to learn, even though I've written this book, and I do not consider myself an expert by any means, even though there's 350 pages of interviews. But it changed me, it changed my heart, and it has affected my interactions with people now every day.
So the fact that you did not get to interview Native Americans, I'm sure there's some others, maybe smaller niches. So does that tend to lead you towards a second book?
Could be, although right now the Lord is leading me in another direction for some children's books.
Okay.
Just can't explain why my heart and mind are going in that direction, but that will be next.
Actually, I'm not quite surprised by that because of the subject matter you talked about. And I'm sure there's a lot of educational moments that could be shared with children through that.
Yeah.
Out of all the interviews you did, you mentioned you cried a little bit, and I'm sure there were some laughters. What was the most interesting interview you felt you did?
Oh my, that is tough because I think they all are really fascinating. The one that broke my heart was my client and friend Rima. She's a Muslim woman, and she went through the Arab Spring. And I still, when I read her chapter, and I've edited this book 4 or 5 times with my publisher, I've read through it again, I still have tears in my eyes because the things that went on during that period, and she was there. She was over in Bahrain for that. The senseless killing. There was a mother who was screaming in her courtyard because her son had been killed by her fellow soccer players because of who he was. So it's extremely sad, extremely disturbing, her chapter.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
With everything included, is there any type of workbook or anything that could be coming out of this, or some kind of educational material?
That's a really good question. I just presented to a group a couple of weeks ago, and they said, hey, for a book club or something, are there any sort of discussion questions? So that might be something I need to talk to my publisher about, but there is not currently.
For other clueless white women or men, what would you encourage them to expect or to anticipate by reading your book?
Expect to be shocked. There are a lot of moments that I just couldn't believe, even though I read the headlines and I listen to the news, there were still things that I was shocked. But there's a lot of good, hopeful stories in here too. It's not all depressing. There's some moments that will actually make you laugh about things that happen, how people turned negative situations around. And there's a lot of hope in here too. So it's not all doom and gloom.
And with that, I think that's a good spot for us to take a break and let our sponsors do their thing. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Charles Brakefield.
And I'm Rox Berkey.
Together, we write as Brakefield and Berkey.
Our techno-thriller series is 12 books strong, with book 13, The Enigma Tracer, planned for 2022.
Techno-thrillers are the cyber good guys versus today's darknet thugs.
We added our series prelude, Out of Poland, a 1939 historical novella, in 2021.
We also have 8 short stories available in family and women's contemporary genres, with more planned for 2022.
Please visit our website, enigmaseries.com, to learn more about why we say technology is today's weapon of choice. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Elle Ballard, and I'm the founder of Women of the World Network, a supportive entrepreneurial community of multinational women. I'm excited to announce we have second series launching for our anthology, Recipes for Body, Mind, and Soul, on April 7th. If you'd like to participate in any of our future anthologies or just check out our community, visit womenoftheworldnetwork.com.
Welcome to B4R.store, a bookstore for indie readers and indie authors, where indie authors can earn their fair share from the books you purchase. We have a wide variety of genres that you can select from. We also have ebooks and paperbacks. You can select authors by their first names, and we also have music. If you're interested in their city or country, we have that listed as well. If you are an author and would like to be on our bookstore, we have 3 options for you. There is a small minimal charge, or you can join our organization at authorsmarketing.org and learn how to better market and sell yourself. That is B4R.store, a bookstore for indie readers and indie authors. Welcome to the Indie Beacon Show, where readers can discover great new books by indie authors. Your host for today's show is B Alan Bourgeois. We hope you do enjoy today's show.
Hi, and welcome back. This is the Indie Beacon Show. This is your host, B Alan Bourgeois, and I appreciate you watching or listening to the show on one of our podcast systems. Today, I have Amy Shankland with us, who has written a book, which is really quite an interesting story. When we were talking, I mean, you've interviewed a lot of people and stuff. In the aspect of those stories, other than the hope, I mean, that you had mentioned a few minutes ago, is there one particular theme that seemed to run through it all?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, well, not always. I would say that the one theme is that everybody certainly had struggles in the past. Everybody certainly has struggles now that they could share with me. But fortunately, everybody was able to point me in the right direction to organizations that can help, like either further what they were saying or organizations that help them.
For example, like PFLAG for the gay and lesbian community and the straight parents? Okay. With the fact that you were doing a lot of these interviews during a very critical time, such as COVID-19, but with all the other things that were going on in our community at that time, did you find it to be questions that you had to change as you went through a period of time, or were you able to keep it consistent throughout?
Oh, I kept it consistent. I did the interviews from early January 2021 until the end of April 2021. So, you know, the pandemic was getting better a little bit. So I stuck to pretty much the same things because I wanted to be fair to everybody. And so the typical questions were, tell me how you grew up, tell me your struggles growing up, tell me where you are now, tell me where what your struggles are now, what would you tell the world to do differently, and then where would you suggest people go, you know, to make a difference in their own communities. And that's where those nonprofits and organizations I mentioned earlier would pop up in conversation.
Okay. And I just had a great question and I lost it.
Oh.
Sorry about that, but that's
Hopefully
okay.
back.
Actually, you mentioned hope in the previous segment, okay? What was the one thing that you kept hearing that gave you that hope?
Oh, well, it's that every story, people did find the people that supported them. You know, a lot of them would start and you would hear about family members who turned away from people because they came out as gay, or a community that turned their back on a woman that I knew who was battling depression. And yet, fortunately, on everybody's journey, they found support, they found their groups, they found their people. And now they're all doing much better, and most everybody is thriving that I interviewed.
So did you find your group, your community?
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah. Yeah, I do have my group, thankfully.
Now, obvious question is, are they other clueless white women, or is it a different type of group?
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's funny. I have had lots of people say, hey, I'm a clueless white woman. The book, I do have to do a little plug, 10% of all proceeds go to Agape Therapeutic Writing Resources in Central Indiana. It's a therapeutic horseback riding center. And so I've been working with them to promote it. And their director right off the bat, Stephanie, said, Amy, I am a clueless white woman. So yes, now that I understand your question better, there are a lot of us out there. And it's been really neat. In fact, I spoke to a group of women about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I sold one book, but I didn't even care because the conversation was like amazing. Here were 10, 12 women just going back and forth, and not all of them were white. You know, we had a Latina woman in the room, and I know we had a Jewish woman in the room, and one woman was part Native American. And it was like, this is why I wrote this book, to get people talking and sharing their stories. And I walked away, I was just walking on a cloud. It was amazing.
I can imagine. And to that aspect, even though the book has only been out for a couple months, have the people who were interviewed, their names are in there and stuff, have people reached out to them, talking about the book or about their situation that you're aware of?
A couple, there are some names that have been changed. So some people are really anonymous, but it's interesting. Somebody reached out to me, and of course I can't share their name, but there are a couple chapters about people battling mental illness. And I got a phone call a few weeks ago from a friend of mine, and they said to me, your book's already helping somebody, because my significant other has battled depression for 10 years and I've told nobody, and I'm a wreck. I need help now. And your book has opened up that possibility. Thank you. And where can I get connected to that organization you mentioned? And that made me so happy. It was great.
Yeah, I mean, that's the joy of being a writer, is to be able to help people change lives in some format, some way and stuff. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
We only have a couple minutes left, and you've shared a lot, but is there one particular thing that you really want to share with people for them to understand and to know?
Yes. When you read this book, there's the main goal is to increase understanding. We don't have understanding. We have too much division. So I'd like to increase the understanding and decrease that division between so many groups of people. Reading this book, if something inspires you, think about it and then act. There's so many things mentioned in this book, organizations you can join, steps that you can take. If anything's inspired you after reading this book, please, I encourage you, don't put the book away and stop thinking about it. Act. Do something today to really help. And if we all do a little something, I think we're going to have some big changes.
So with that, we're going to take a break. We'll come back. We'll talk about your website and follow up on the book. But we'll be back in just a moment.
Welcome to the Indie Beacon Show, where readers can discover great new books by indie authors. Your hostess for today's show is Charlotte Cannon. We do hope you enjoyed today's show.
Each and every one of us has a mission in life. Mine is to help people laugh through the good times and the bad. My name is Charlotte Canyon, and I am an author, a speaker, and a host on Indie Beacon Radio. If you need me to speak at an event or autograph my book, you can contact me at charlotte@charlottecanyon.com. Thank you, and have a blessed day.
That's really good. And so what other programs are you planning to create?
Many things our organizations work with is, of course, helping authors learn how to better market and sell themselves. So we have the Authors Marketing International Group, the Texas Authors Institute of History, the Drop Everything and Read, Indie. But there's a new organization that's being formed called the Authors School of Business. And this is exactly that. It's a school where authors will learn from the very beginning how to put their books together to get them published, whether it's traditional or self or hybrid, and all the way through the sales and marketing aspect. Make sure they understand every aspect of getting that book done and done right so that they have a greater chance of success. So that's one of many different things that we're working on.
Welcome to the Indie Beacon Show, where readers can discover great new books by indie authors. Your host for today's show is B Alan Bourgeois. We hope you do enjoy today's show.
Howdy, and welcome back to the Indie Beacon Show. I am your host, B Alan Bourgeois, and thank you again for watching or listening to one of our many podcasts or YouTube. Today, I have been talking with Amy Shankland, and it's about her book, Interviews by a Clueless White Woman. Amy, of course, people can probably get your book on Amazon and other bookstores and stuff. Do you have a website?
I do. It is author Amy Thornton, and that is AUTHORAMYTHORNTON.wordpress.com.
All righty. And out of curiosity, because you've had some conversations with people after the book has come out and stuff, is there some place on the website that people can submit their feedback about, the stories they've read and how they relate to them?
Yes. Yep, I will have that on the front page.
Great. You also have other books. So let's real quickly touch upon each of the books you've written.
Okay, sure. Do you want me to start with the one I released in 2020?
Sounds good.
It was Lighten Your Mental Load. And in summary, women in particular tend to have a lot of mental things going on in their head. And this was identified in 2017 as a big, big issue, finally. And so I wrote a book about how to lighten that. It's called Lighten Your Mental Load. Before that, in 2018, I wrote a book called Joy to You and Me at Work, about how to bring joy to the workplace. Those are both available still on Amazon. And then finally, in 2013, I self-published a fiction novel called Hoop Mama. It's about a gal who does hoop dancing with a hula hoop.
Okay. And all of those, of course, are available through your website or Amazon or the usual channels and stuff. And
Yep.
you have social media accounts?
I do, and you can find those on my website at the very bottom.
Great. Now, one question, you've written a variety of stuff, but what is the one thing you would tell somebody who wants to write a book?
Oh my gosh, do it. And the most success I've had is to treat it like a part-time job, one that you love, but you have to set aside that time. And I literally do a schedule, and I'm like really good about it. 3 evenings a week for 2 hours at least for me works, and Sundays. And that's how I get it done. And if you work at it little by little, you will get that book done. I hear so many people say they want to write a book and they never do it. And it breaks my heart.
What would you say is the most challenging aspect of having a book written and published?
Oh my gosh, it's a lot of rejection. I know the audience, I know I'm preaching to the choir. And you have to kind of have a tough skin and just keep going and going. And it's my dream. It's been my dream since I was 8 to do this. And I'm just going to keep on going. Fortunately, I got so many rejections in the summer of 2021 that I turned to Warren Publishing. I thought, you know what? I'm just going to submit. They only take 20% of applications. My odds are low, and they actually took it. So you have to just keep trying. If it means that much to you, you can't let those rejections get you down.
Good concept to keep in mind. And with that, we are at the end of the show. I thank you very much, Amy, for being with us. We wish you the best of luck.
Thanks for having me back, Alan.
Thank you for watching the Indie Beacon Show, produced by B Alan Bourgeois for the Authors Marketing International LLC, copyright 2022, voiceover by B Alan Bourgeois. If you would like to be a sponsor of the show, please contact us at authorsmarketing@outlook.com. If you would like to be on this show, it is free to authors. Simply fill out the form at indiebeacon.com. The music is provided by Happy Follows. The music is entitled